Welcome to the Sky Talk Doc podcast, where we navigate life, relationships, and everything in between with thought-provoking curiosity and a touch of grace. Buckle up, Buttercup. This is a flight you won't forget. Before we get into today's podcast and our amazing guest, I just want to tell you, you're not broken. You're just wired for survival in a world that doesn't always feel safe. Maybe you keep people at a distance because deep down you don't feel very lovable, or maybe you overachieve because a part of you believes you're not enough. But that's not weakness. It's your brain doing its best to protect an old wound. But here's the thing. What protected you then might be sabotaging you now. If you're tired of the same arguments, same spirals, or feeling unseen in your relationships, take the 7 Primal Wounds quiz at 7primalwounds.com to find out what your wound is and stop the same crappy patterns, chaos, and relationship conflict today. Trevor, welcome to the Sky Talk Doc podcast. You have a really cool website. It's probably one of the coolest websites I've seen in a while. And one thing that really stood out that's on your website is when your life is on autopilot and it just doesn't pan out as successfully as it can. And I, being a pilot myself, have had many fun adventures with autopiloting. Usually autopilot is trying to kill you quite literally, hunting around, trying to find altitudes, nose diving the airplane. So I am super excited to talk with you about kind of your approach to life. And if you could share with the listeners a little bit about what you're doing and how you got where you are, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you, Michaela. It's a privilege to be on. Great opening question, because I could fill the 30 minutes trying to figure that one out for myself, because I'm still just a little boy in bigger trousers having an adventure. So the outside world views me, I think, as a serial entrepreneur because I've built a number of companies and they've been successful, and I have a kind of a formula to do that because I like building. But I see myself more of a fixer. I've never been really good at anything. No basic skills. But sometimes you see something that irritates you and it gets under your skin and you can't find a solution. So you just, I'm going to do it myself. And it turns out that I'm quite good at on-the-spot fixing. And so these days, in what we're going to talk about today, they kind of get your life off autopilot type of thing. I find myself in the personal development and almost self-help space reluctantly because I'm not a big fan of it. So much of it is inauthentic, and it's inauthentic because it is kind of formulaic and generic and autopilot. And it makes you feel good a little bit about yourself and it makes your life feel better, but it doesn't help you get a better life. You need practical tools. You need to do some work. You need to actually engage. And so I'm all about that. So I decided to get into this field and try to fix it. So after I sold my first company, and let's do the numbers because people pay attention when you give a proper number. I'm not talking about a corner shop or a mom and pop thing. That's fine if that's what people want to do. I started with nothing, built a company that made a big impact in rare diseases and pediatrics, and then sold it 5 years later for 105.5 million. But the number's important because it shows, okay, now I've got credibility. Okay, who is this guy and what gives him the right to tell me that you can change your life, right? But the interesting thing is that I set that intention of selling my company for at least 100 million before I started it. And this is one of the secrets. I'm a physicist, so I try to add into my recipe of adventure in life, a mixture of understanding the illusion of time and how our words and thoughts are really powerful. If we're clever about using them, then we can achieve better things or, have better adventures. And so after selling that company, I wrote the book, the New York Times bestseller, 3 Simple Steps. And it went word by mouth. It just took off and became a New York Times bestseller 3 times. And my claim to fame is that the first time it did that, it knocked 50 Shades of Grey off the top spot for about 2 hours. If I have a headstone, I'm going to put that on the headstone. I was more interesting than that for about 2 hours. And so since then, it's just kind of evolved and expanded. And so now I have the website trevorgblake.com, where I have a transformation experience for people to go through 30 to 40 days. It takes an hour a day and it just changes lives. So that's who I am and why I'm here and talking about it. But my message really is that I'm not a fan of law of attraction. I think there is no law. Okay. But I am a fan of the laws of energy because they're real scientific laws and I'm a scientist. And so I know if I apply real science, it takes the pressure off my shoulders of having to do something right, or am I getting it wrong and everyone else is getting it right? Am I screwing up? If you follow the scientific laws, then life becomes a little easier. And so what I provide to people is practical tools based on science. And that's the differentiator in this field. And I'm having a blast, I've got to be honest, because I get to be invited on shows like this with wonderful people like Michaela, and what an honor. I honestly do feel like 5 years old again.
There is so much to unpack here. I'll go back to my first thought when you were talking, which was a lot of the self help industry doesn't offer the problem solution in a way that there's something that's going to come out on the other side. It's a lot of woo woo. It's very ethereal. There's a lot of components to it that sound really nice on paper. But unless you're actually coming up with something that's going to be tangible in the way that you approach it, it's not very effective. My work in Seven Primal Wounds and what I'm doing is taking these, arguments that people are having on repeat and these poor business decisions that they're making and giving them a framework to actually recognize their pattern of behavior and interrupt the system. And a lot of it does kind of go to the amygdala and it goes to the whatever we've conditioned in our muscle memory is our weakest link and our most powerful link at the same time. And so we're going to go to that place and we're going to grab whatever's seared in there when it matters. And if you've seared what you don't like, that's what you're grabbing anyway. Go ahead. Sure.
No, I totally agree. The thing though I like to tell people is it's when I'm talking to someone, it's not your fault. It's how we're built. So our brains are built that way. A lot of people, they we take it on ourselves and say, okay, I'm not doing very well because other people are doing better than me. What am I doing wrong? And it's not like that. It's like what you say is absolutely true. But we also have, in our wonderful brains of 100 billion neurons, we have two magic chips, basically. They're like chips. We have one in the, you know better than I do, I'm sure. You have one in the back of the brainstem called the reticular activation system. And what you're talking about, that's the thing that keeps us in a loop. It works like a Google algorithm. Google algorithms or all browser algorithms or search algorithms, they pay attention to what we're paying attention and they give us more of that. And this does exactly the same thing. It pays attention to what we're paying attention to. It gives us more of it and filters out the rest. So we end up with a narrow life around this one sort of thought pattern that we have. So if we keep seeing fearful news headlines, we keep getting in a situation where everything seems fearful. So if we learn to do what you're saying, which is basically pause and take a step back and realize that we don't have control over the thought process of this because it happens so fast, but now we can react to how the thoughts we just had. What a difference that makes. That means, okay, I'm not at fault for having a bad thought, but I know it's self-sabotage. I'm going to have a good thought now. And we reframe it. And it takes practice, and there's lots of in trevorgblake.com, there's lots of freebies. You can get lots of ideas of how to do this. In front of a mirror is very powerful. But we also have a chip here. This is the mirror neurons, and this is how we mimic. So we watch, we mimic. So we can see a child put their hand on a hot stove, and we know not to do the same thing. Interestingly, only humans have these two chips. Only humans. No other species on Earth has these two chips. Some reptiles have this one. One species of primates has that one. But together, no, nothing. Only humans. They're very powerful. But when we're not aware of it, they control us. And they put us in autopilot. And so once we're aware of it, like you're saying, once we're aware of that process and where the synaptic communication is taking place, then we can pause and just reprogram. It's a bit like, I think of it as like, updating your computer software or updating your iPhone. I mean, when we buy an iPhone, I don't know what number of updates we're on right now. I've lost count. It happens automatically, thank goodness. But most people, when they are born, they're still on version 1 of themselves when they get to our ages. And so if we know that we can update ourselves on a regular basis, it gives us so much personal power. And that's what I'm all about at trevorgblake.com. It changes people's lives. And then to see people just becoming happy on the inside, and it's been a long time since they felt that, and then that reflecting in the external world that they're projecting, so they become happy in the external world as well. It's why I keep doing, I'm sure it's why you do what you're doing, to see people's reboot themselves is very powerful.
It's absolutely. And so much that you said is just completely in alignment with my own studies. And I was kind of chuckling as you were talking because one of the chief editors at Forbes Advantage that I worked with, she says, it seems to me that concepts all bubble to the surface at the same time. And so much of what you were saying is so well aligned. I tell people you're not broken, you're actually working very well, right? You've learned from a minor hot stove moment that particular interaction with your partner or whatever, something that was in their facial expression or their tone. And now you have a fear of abandonment or a fear of rejection. And if you don't take the pause, which is the P in primal, and reframe, which is the R in primal, then you're going to continue to avoid the stove altogether. And you're going to microwave Hot Pockets for the rest of your life, which is maybe not the best idea because you can be cooking gourmet meals and really getting the most out of, what you're eating for dinner. And you don't have to avoid the hot stove. You just have to learn how to work within it. And once you realize the human brain is so conditioned for our survival, it is so adept at picking up on 11 million bits of data a second to keep us alive, you realize there's so much happening subconsciously to protect you from something that could be a threat. You really have to pull the intention into it. You really have to pull the rational thought or the higher cognitive thinking into your decision making, because too often we react when there's a fire coming through the house and nothing rational is happening at that time. You know, you're in survival mode, you're out for yourself, and your brain and body is functioning in a way that it's not really considering the greater outcome for maybe the entire family system or the entire business. You know, all it's doing is keeping this limbic system alive. And so I love so much what you said about that. And you know, something that I was really curious about that you've talked about, and I've had this podcast actually started as a self-help woo-woo podcast, and it's really shifted away from that after I had too many people that were too woo-woo. One thing that we have talked about a lot, I've had some quantum physicists and things like that, is the power of your thoughts. And, you know, we talk about frequency and vibration and the ways in which, you know, call it the law of attraction, but really just the way energy works in the universe in terms of opposite and equal reaction. I mean, we're just talking positive, negative electron things here. How do you see that from a scientific level, and how does that work with your system? And then I want to talk about one other thing connected to that, because this is just a personal, selfish thing, which is all humans really are. I am actually on
Nothing wrong with that. I don't see what's wrong with that.
So this book, you know, I've written and published 9 books, and this one is the only one that I care about being a New York Times bestseller. I got the stamp with the Amazon bestseller. I can put that on things, but it doesn't really matter. The reason that I want the New York Times bestseller is because I know that then means that this book reached that many people. And truly, this is a huge passion project for me. I believe it is going to change lives. I see it changing lives in my practice using this framework and these 7 primal wounds. And so I really have a mission, grassroots mission, to see this become a New York Times bestseller. And so I want to know, what do I need to do? What are my steps that I need to do to ensure that I see that to fruition? What can I do now? I'm launching March 31st. So we've got
You
60
got
days.
time. You got time. So here's the secret. And for all of you listeners who also, because these days, you know, we live in wonderful technology when anyone can write a book now and get it out there and self-publish. And, you know, some are good and some not so good. And it'll always come down to the impact you make on the reader. And because that then word of mouth sells with social media, etc. Here's the secret to New York Times bestseller: it's not how many you sell, it's where you sell them at the same time. And there are companies that exist in the United States, and this is one of the reasons I did what I did, who will sell you a package. It's very expensive, $100,000. They will get you New York Times bestseller status. And the way they do it is that you could have you know, a topic that you feel passionate about, but you're just in one state and you sell 100,000 books in one state, you will never hit the list. You can have a general book. It could be a romance. But if you sell 20 in all 50 states in the same week, you'll be at least number 5 for that week. Once you hit it once, you can have it printed on your book. It's cheating. And I'm sorry to destroy a lot of people's ideology about, you know, there must be a good book because it says New York Times bestseller. So facing that, and because I'm into the most important thing for me is authenticity. And so faced with that, and what my publisher says, you know, you're really not going to be a New York Times bestseller until it passes so many words of mouth. And how are you going to do that? I did 2 things. One is I took out position with Hudson News in the airports for a week.
Yep.
Wasn't that expensive?
Yep.
But my book, 3 Simple Steps, it's really designed for the road warrior. Pick it up to your next flight. You can read it by the time you land, change your life. And it talks, the very first of the steps is exactly what you were talking about, which is how thoughts are energy. And if you know that, how to reframe that. So I like your primal. I can't steal it, obviously, but I love that. And I love the analogy of the, you know, pause and reframe. So that's a pretty cool thing. You can do something like that. But what I also did was I gave a free copy to every library in the United States, 16,000 books. And there's ways to do that. And the reason I did it was that's authentic. And the nicest part of that was that I got the initial New York Times best-selling status was a guarantee because of that, because they barcode everything and it goes back into the system that New York Times uses. But the beauty of that is some of my best success stories came from somebody picking it off a pile of books sitting on a table in the library. They just picked
Well,
it up, took it home, changed their lives. And I think, wow, I didn't intend that. I got to be completely honest. I didn't really think about that, but that's been amazing.
I've got to tell you, so when I approach this system, and I'm like you, I'm a geek. I look at the numbers, I look at the systems, I look at the algorithms, I look at the way things work. I've always been, and not to call you a geek, I'll call myself a geek. I don't mean to pass that on to you.
Oh, I've been called that so many times. I take it as a compliment,
It's a
actually.
compliment, right? Yeah. So I really
I
like
thirst
to.
for knowledge.
Yeah, I know my mom used to she said she would get driven so nuts because I was always, I'd ask a question, she'd answer it, and I'd say, but why? But why? There was never enough of an answer. Like, no, that's not enough. We're going to have to go a little deeper. So, what I did was I actually took 100 advanced reader copies and I flew them across the country in my small airplane. And I had people from social media meet me at the airports. But then inside of it was a flight log. So they would read it, sign it, and pass it on. And the book's already gotten to a lot of different countries, but it doesn't have the purchaser barcode. So that's the thing. But I also did opt for the Hudson bookstores as well. That was a big thing for me. I felt like that was so important.
Yeah, I think that's a smart move. And it also is a tremendous way to impact people because if someone buys it on the way to the next flight, they're going to read it.
Yeah,
A lot
100%.
of people buy
What
books
else
and
have you got
sit
to
there.
do, right? Just read the dang thing and then pass it to someone else or,
Yep.
take it home and mail it to your sister or whatever.
No, I actually got past my own book on a flight once. The person next to me was reading it, and when they finished there, she passed it to me and said, "This is." I mean, it's like I'm singing my own praises. Not at all. It made such a difference in this person's life immediately. They said, "You got to read this book. You got to read this book." And I smiled, and she thought I wasn't interested, so she gave it to me.
That's hilarious. And then you just pull out your pen, sign it, and hand it back. Oh, I love that so much. So in your program, you actually offer people steps to learn how to kind of retrain the brain. And tell me about how I know we touched on it, the chip, the autopilot, but how do people actually step out of that kind of autonomic response, so to speak?
So a little understanding goes a long way. I always think when we're using tools, if we understand how and why it works, it gives us the confidence to go further with it and also takes the pressure off about, am I doing it right? So first of all, there's a little understanding of what energy is and what it isn't. Most people are very good at saying what it is. No one really knows what it isn't. And then from that perspective, understanding that absolutely everything in our life, in our world, is made of these fermions and bosons, the smallest particles in the atoms, or that form atoms eventually, and that we're all made of the same stuff. Even the car we're traveling in, the computer we're talking on, you and I, all made of these tiny little fermions and bosons, all jiggling. It's called jiggling strings of energy. It's my favorite description in quantum physics. It's called string theory, and it really does. We can imagine it visually like little strings of energy dancing around. And when we understand that, we know that therefore also thoughts and also words are really, really powerful, like silver bullets, actually. We can destroy somebody with a chosen word and we can build somebody with the chosen word. It's choice. But oftentimes the worst words are reserved for ourselves. We're our biggest critics all the time. And if we don't know the power of that it will hold us and it will anchor us and keep us in the same patterns of behavior, then we find ourselves what I call slipping into quicksand. So step one is about how to get out of that quicksand, and we do it with the clever use of thoughts and words. And we don't have to become saints. And I screw up more probably than anybody does, which is why I developed the tool in the first place. But so we just get a little bit better one time or another time we catch ourselves having the thought that's not helping us. Like, particularly, we think of something like debt. We get our credit card statement where you go, "Oh God, what did I do? I really didn't need those shoes, but I bought them anyway." And we feel really bad and we crush ourselves. And what we do is we focus on the debt aspect of it and our fear of it. Well, guess what's going to happen? The roof is going to leak or a window is going to break.
Yeah.
Something else is going to happen to keep you in the debt. The repetitive thing that life, because it's all energy, we're all connected. So the window's feeling that, the roof is feeling that, the world is feeling it around you. And so we end up in this quicksand. So if we just every now and again say, hang on a sec, that didn't help. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reframe that and I'm going to imagine that I'm debt free. And what am I going to do? I'm going to walk to the nearest liquor store. I'm going to buy the most expensive bottle of champagne. I'm going to celebrate with my friends because I just paid cash for it. And I'm debt free and we're going to have a big celebration. We just do a quick imagination like that. You can do it in 5 seconds. I think that took me I talk very fast. 5 seconds. And I need to learn more about the pause that you have in your primal pause. So we reframe it that way, and then we take away the self-sabotage. So the first step is really a little bit about making that become a habit. And the more it becomes a habit, the further we move away from the quicksand. and people just they lighten up and they say, I can't believe it. And then things happen in your life now because your thoughts and words are different, that start at first to feel like miracles. Like somebody just knocked on the door and gave me something. I just bumped into somebody in a coffee shop and they're the perfect person I need to meet right now. But then we realized that they were always there. We just didn't notice. And so it's not, it's not the magic of miracles or anything like that. It's just that, life switches. Our two chips start to give us more of what we're paying attention to.
Oh,
That's
like the car that you just bought, now you notice them all over the place.
it's like someone parachuted them in overnight.
Yes, it's like, "Oh my gosh, everybody owns this car." Yeah. I had a friend once tell me it's a figure 8, and you're going around life's a figure 8, and it's a leveled figure 8, and so you're going to stay on the level that you're on until you can see the new path that's above it, and then you level up, and then you're on the next path, and you're always trying to get to your highest version or your best self or the best path that's available in that moment. And I really loved that. It was a great visualization tool for me to see. And so something that I say is when I'm having a negative moment, I'll say, this is not a good look for me. This is not a good look for me because the story that I'm telling myself is blank. And so what I then change and reframe is expose my highest path. I want to see my next level. And I'll start to think in those terms. And it's really powerful. I actually had this crazy thing happen where I wanted to visit this foreign country. I'm considering purchasing some land over there. And I had reached out to someone, and the way that the path works is once I leveled up, she says, "Oh, well, you can just come stay at my Airbnb, which is right next to the property that you're looking at." I'm thinking, what are the chances that that would have happened? But it's because I think I invited the highest path into the periphery, into my visualization, started visualizing myself sitting on that land. What would it look like? What are the breezes like? What is the sun going to look like? Is it going to be sticky hot? What am I going to be drinking? I started to do kind of these visualization woo woo things. And it's wild how, it may sound crazy, but it works.
Yeah. So I have a tool in transformation experience that does exactly what you just described. But I think we live in a very sort of visual lifestyle these days. But people see we have 5 senses, but this sense of sight seems to be the leader at the moment. Used to be hearing, but now it's sight. And so I call it the mini mind movie, and it's exactly what you say. It's the end of the transformation experience because you have to learn certain tools to get to do a mini mind movie perfectly so that it works every time. But it's what you say. One of the tools we use to get to the perfect mini mind movie is window shopping. So we put ourselves in your case, we put ourselves in that field. We put ourselves in that country. We put ourselves. We don't have to buy anything or do anything. We just have to feel the energy of the place, and then we pull it into our mini mind movie. And it is a skill that takes a bit of practice, but when people perfect it, I mean, they just get so much confidence. Self-confidence is one of only 2 things we need to be successful. The other, the magic of thinking big. Go really big, and then when you think you're big, go even bigger. Because
Wow.
then that makes the stuff that used to be hard to us like child's play. And so,
Yeah.
so we do those 2 things in a mini mind movie, and people have so much fun doing it because it is fantasy. Everyone loves to daydream, and everyone loves visualization. It's not, when we give it a term like visualization, we sort of make it sound a little boring, but it's not. It's just what we did when we were 5.
Daydreaming just when we were a
Yeah.
kid. Exactly. And it's funny because when I started the book publishing process with this one, my partner kept saying, I need you to stop saying that. I need you to start saying this is going to sell 20 million copies. He would actually say that he would do my thought stopping. And I'm now trying to develop a mini mind movie. I love this term that really shows visualizing that people are reading it in airports, in bookstores, in libraries, that it really is. I walk into Target, it's there, someone's picking it out. Like I'm really trying to create that mind movie. I'm curious though, because I have a block and I don't want to have that block. And I see this in my sessions all the time with clients. It's like they want to stay angry at their partner. They want to think they're doomed for divorce. They're never going to feel connected or loved, that they're going to have a sexless marriage or whatever. So when somebody has a block, is it because there's something that we need to learn from? What is that? Because I know how to create this mind movie. And I do see myself having a little bit of a block in this way.
Yeah, so we call them anchors. I mean, I call them anchors. I'm English, so I love catchphrases. So identifying the anchors is a key part of the transformation experience because we all have them. And it's not that you have to cut them and get rid of them. It's that you have to allow them at least to stretch enough to help you go off and do what you want to do. You don't have to cut ties, although I do that on purpose in my life. So we've identified the anchors. Typically, it'll be childhood. There's many of them, as you know better than I do. And then it'll be experiences like relationship experiences. And what we learn to do is a tool I have called Shoot the Past. And what we do is every time we think about that thing that hurt us or that time when we hurt somebody else and all those things, what we're doing, because everything's energy and energy is all connected, we're doing it to ourselves right now as if it just happened for the first time. But we've actually done it to ourselves 1,000 times because we've replayed that thought process 1,000 times. That's an anchor and that holds us. And until we get rid of that anchor, we can't move forward. And so what we do is we reframe it and we go back in time. We learn in the transformation experience how time is an illusion. It's very easy to learn and mind-boggling for most people. And when we learn time is illusion, we can put ourselves anywhere we want. We can go to the forward time, which is what a mini mind movie is. And I'll finish off with that for you because it'll be useful for you, I think, Michaela. We can also go back in time and we can imagine things went differently. They behave differently. And the person who we think's hurt us all of our lives, and we've been holding on to that because we choose it, like you say, don't we? Just choose to hold on to the emotion of that. Well, the key thing is scientifically, emotions last in the body 90 seconds. That's it. We see something, we have an emotion, we create a cascade of hormones, particularly corticosteroid, if it's a negative thought. And that goes through our system very quickly, but it's gone in 90 seconds. And after that, we're choosing to hold that emotion forever. And so what we do is we go back and say, okay, I realized I held on to this now. So I'm going to go back to that person and I'm going to imagine having a huge hug and us both forgiving each other and us both having a great time. And this now sounds like woo-woo, but it's actually scientific time travel, if you like. It actually, we call it shoot the past. And of course, you haven't changed the past, but you've changed the emotional signature that's flown with you or journeyed with you through the life. And then it's amazing what happens. The number of people in the transformative experience who did this, and then literally 20 seconds, the phone goes or that the pesky ping happens on their iPhone, and it's that person they just did that with. It's incredible and powerful, really powerful. So we do that, but then we can also go forward. This is the bit I really wanted to leave for you. We go forward in the mini mind movie, and instead of having to imagine, there's 20 million people signing and I'm doing all the signing, what you're imagining there is the vehicle that gets you there. You don't need to worry about the vehicle. If you focus on the end result, vehicles show up.
Okay.
And you might think it's the book, but it could be something completely different. That's how I built 7 companies. I had no idea that's what was going to happen to get to me to there. So what I focus on in the mini mind movie, or teach people in the mini mind movie, is to focus on a day in your life after the success. What are you doing the next day? And when you've already got your 20 million readers, when you've already, if your intention is to be a billionaire, you're already a billionaire. So how are you going to spend the day? And when we focus on how to spend the day, it gets really fun and exciting. It gets really specific. And, one of my intentions, my first company, the ad intention I mentioned at the beginning to sell, I sold my first company for at least $100 million is the intention I used before I even knew what I was doing or getting into. When that happened about 5 and a bit years later, my mini mind movie was to spend the next day, all 24 hours, in my pajamas and slippers, walking around the city, going to my favorite Michelin star restaurant. And that's exactly what I did. So I flew from Southern California to Bellevue. I had a house in Southern California, an apartment in Bellevue. And I didn't know the deal had been done until I landed, because in those days, it's about 2009, something like that. The cell phones weren't very well. You couldn't connect on the plane. And so when I landed, after about 30 seconds, it goes ding, and I look at it and it says, congratulations, company sold 105.5 million.
Wow.
And I felt really calm about it. I thought I would have screamed, but no, I felt really calm about it.
Wow.
And my wife and I, we had a chauffeur thing going on. So we got a chauffeur thing, what would be like Black Lane or something like, or Uber now. And we went to the apartment, we put our pajamas on, put our slippers on, and we walked down to our favorite Michelin star restaurant. And no one said anything. No one questioned us. They just served us like normal. They probably think, oh, here's that eccentric couple again.
My gosh, that is epic. Oh, wow. I can't even fathom. And you had the confidence to pull it off because you're like, I'm quite literally a multimillionaire and I'm eating here in my pajamas. Tell me otherwise.
Yes, exactly. What are you going to do about it? I'll buy the restaurant.
Tell you what, just have everybody come out here. I'll cover their entire wages for the month. Wow. That's incredible. I just love this so much. And, to your point that you said earlier, I feel like a kid because I get to do these things now because I don't have to worry about these other things. So what's your biggest advice to people that are hesitant to even try? Like it just feels so out there for them to try to think that they could transform anything in their life. What's your biggest advice?
Start.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing I find with people is they've tried to figure it all out ahead of time and then enact a plan. But that happens in business all the time. People spend 2 years doing a business plan. And then the thing is, when you start the business, it's completely different to what you expect. So just start and figure it out because we're really smart as human beings. We've got these two chips, don't forget. So when it comes to relationships, I don't think so. I'm a bit contrarian really because I think if I've had two relationships in my life and I've never dated. My first wife I was married to for 1 month less than 40 years, and she died in 2020.
Mm.
Then I met this amazing, inspiring woman, Jess, who's with me now, and we're 3.5 years old now in our marriage. So, but I've never dated. I just bumped into them and went,
You're my person.
can I swear on your program? But here we go. Wow. My life just changed. And it was just like that. It felt magical and all the rest of it. But that doesn't mean that we didn't have lots of arguments. It doesn't mean that we didn't disagree. And it doesn't mean that, I wouldn't say it's bumpy, but I don't have a problem with the argument because how boring would my relationship have been with Lynn, my late wife, if it had been perfect? I'd have fallen
Mm.
asleep, I think. And so you can't learn with just perfect. So I'd say to people, don't be against all the bumpiness of a relationship. Lynn was quite feisty with me. And the funny thing was, there'd be little things that really irritated me. Boy, what I would have given to have those things back after she died.
Yeah.
Every single one of them, including the squeaky floor she used to seem to magically find every time she got out of bed. That I kept saying I must fix that one day, never did. How much did I miss that squeak? And so I tell people that, don't try to figure it all out. Just get in there, and then you'll figure it out over time. And that might be terrible relationship advice. I don't know, but I've been blessed in my life to be surrounded by incredibly powerful feminine energy. So my mother, her story is the first chapter of 3 Simple Steps. And she was diagnosed with cancer when I was 7. She told the God that she believed in, "I'll decide when to die, not you." And she meant it. And she didn't die till I was 21, the last kid to leave her home. That was very powerful. So everything I've achieved in life is really down to the lessons she taught me. But then
Wow.
she handed the baton to Lynn because Lynn was her chemotherapy nurse. And then Lynn handed the baton to Jess because they were connected and on a online course together. And so I've just kind of traveled around with these 3 amazing feminine energies and learned at the knees of this, deepening my intuition and learning the power of knowing, which is women have naturally. But they always say the same thing too, like, what's wrong with an argument now? What's wrong with that?
Oh my gosh, the story as you were talking, I was actually getting goosebumps. That is so transformational. I can see how this has become such a foundation for your work because it's real, it's lived, and it's absolutely outstanding. Something I always tell couples, and I often remind my partner, is those pet peeves are the you'll miss them when I'm gone. I mean, truly they really are. And whenever my partner does something that drives me bonkers, I always say, I'd miss that if he wasn't here,
Yeah.
even though it drives me absolutely nuts or whatever. And I really think that is so powerful. And, an analogy that I often use with people is that life is really a teeter totter. And if you live in the center of the teeter totter, you're going to have little lows and little highs, and that's okay. But if you really want to experience all that life has to offer, you got to move out to the outside seat. And you're going to have a lot of high highs and really amazing moments. And you're going to have a lot of low lows because that's the way the teeter totter of life works. And so, if you're in a place where you're struggling, scooch forward on the teeter totter a little bit and then scooch back out when you're ready to really experience all that there is to offer. And I think it helps me when I'm maybe feeling exceptionally down or having a really low bump to remember that usually the other side of that is a nice high, something really incredible that I didn't even think was possible.
And that's the natural wave of energy, right? We imagine energy as moving in waves, and we imagine, going up and going down, and going up and going down. And that's just, for me, it's always been the nature of life. I mean, it happens in my businesses. I've been rejected and knocked back, 50, 60 times in my life. You just, you do a little mirror work, pump yourself back up again, and off you go. And I've messed up in my 2 relationships so many times by saying the wrong thing at the wrong time or being untidy or all of these things, and then you have like moments of irritation and dignity and, up and down. You just get some space, step back. And the secret, if any man's listening to this, there is a secret. Always apologize, even if you know you're right.
I love that. I love that. And it's really the heartbeat of life. Life has it just the way that our heart even beats. There's the low and there's the high. But to say, you know what, it doesn't ever hurt to apologize for your part. I always add that justification, right? So I'm saying, I apologize for my part. I still don't agree or like your part, but I can apologize for my part.
That's been my experience too, that I apologize, but my wife will apologize and then add a but.
But I wouldn't have to if you hadn't this. Yeah, I love that so much. Wow, I know we ran a little bit over. Trevor, this was such
Oh,
an
it's fun.
incredible conversation, and I love the way that, you're passing the baton to so many people through the ripple in the pond effect. That's just so powerful and so awesome. Trevor G. Blake, folks, is where you can find him and learn about this transformation experience where you can step off of autopilot. Thank you again so much, Trevor, for coming on. This is such a fantastic conversation.
It was. I think we could go on for hours. It's so much fun, Mikhail. I appreciate it. Great questions. And I hope it's something that you and I have said is useful to whoever's watching and listening. So
I
thank you.
love that so much. And I'll definitely circle back with you when I hit the New York Times bestseller list. The views expressed in this podcast aren't necessarily those of the Sky Talk Doc. They're here to challenge your thinking and inspire growth. Until next time, blue skies and tailwinds.